talk about reading command line inputs, which you're going to need to do for program 1. So basically everything you need to know for program 1 is in the key points here, but I will go through an example so that it's clear. So let me get my terminal here. I'll put it over here, put this one away. Okay, so let me take a look at an example program that I've got here where I'm going to take in input from the command line. So normally we have just been defining main as it returns an int, but it doesn't take anything in, right? But to take in inputs, use inputs to main is going to be the idea here. So main will take 2 inputs here. The first one is an integer, and we have called it argc. This is just the name of the input, so you could call it anything you wanted, but usually it's going to be called argc, so you might as well just go with that. And so one thing to note is the actual name of the program that you're running is always an input, so argc will always be at least 1. So that can be a little confusing, but one place you might need to debug your code is if you forget that the name of the program is an argument. You might be trying to access the very first argument thinking is the input, but it would actually just be the name. Next, we have an array of character pointers. So basically this is an array of strings. This will make more sense once we cover pointers, but for now the point is just argv is an array. We can access it using the subscript notation, and in the first argv sub 1 is going to be our input. So to start off, let's just see how we can print the number of arguments. So I'll use printf, and I'm going to say the number of arguments is, and we're printing an integer, so I'll use %d placeholder, and I'll make a new line. And so like I said, argc is the number of arguments. So let's just see this in action. Compile it up here. So here, we're seeing that the number of arguments was 1, and the point of this program is going to be to take in a number and square it. So what happens when we put a number in here? You can also see that we could actually put in as many arguments as we want. For program 1, you only need to put in 1 argument, so we'll continue just practicing with just 1 argument. But argc here is 2. Now, let's see, how do we actually access those arguments? So we know argc is the number of arguments, so let's just iterate over those so we can print them out. In your program 1, you just need to access argv at 1, but for our purposes to really understand these command line arguments, let's iterate over them. So I'm going to say for int I starting at 0, we'll go until I is less than argc, and we'll increment by 1. And every time through this for loop, let's just print the argument. Maybe I'll put a tab in so we see that these are a list, and we'll say arg. And so what we're going to want to do is print out the elements of argv, right? So these are strings, and we're going to learn about strings later. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use the string placeholder, but you, in your program, you're going to convert these strings to integers immediately, so you don't actually need to use the string placeholder. But I'm just showing it so we can look at what's happening. Oops. So %s is the string placeholder, so that's nice, hopefully easy to remember. And we want argv at I. So let's see how this works. And so if we just put in square and 100, we see here that those are arguments, square and 100. And again, if I did this with another argument, then I can access that from argv. And then finally, let's see how to convert our argument into an int. So the thing here is we're going to using ATOI, so this is ASCII to integer, and this is part of the standard library, so that's why we have the preprocessor directive up here telling us to include stdlib.h. So I guess I'm going to need a number here. Let's say int num, number from the user, and I guess I'll say from the command line. And so we would like to assign num to be whatever comes back from converting argv at 1 to an integer, right? So I'm expecting that the thing after the program name that's entered can be converted to an integer, so I use this function here. And now let me say something like you entered, and I'm just going to put num in here, and I'm going to say a square is, and then I'm going to put in num and num times num as what will fill in those placeholders. Now let's see if this works. And it looks like it does, so let's try it. So running my program with one input of 100, and it says you entered 100, and it squares 10,000, just like we wanted. So it looks like that's working. So you should be ready to read in an integer from the command line now.